Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Illuminate session, where I am talking about my Camino experience. I'm just making sure here that everything is set up and actually going. I couldn't get my Zoom to work today. Okay. Just wanting to make sure you guys have sound and that you're able to hear me. I couldn't get Zoom to work for me today to even open up the video, so I'm just going from my phone here, while also having my computer open so I can see your comments and stuff as they're coming in. Just gonna mute that and alrighty. So welcome and thank you for joining me for this live tonight about my Camino experiences. It's interesting because when I asked everybody what kind of questions they might have for me, a lot of the questions at the beginning are very much like, the very basic human questions. One of the most asked questions was, where did I use the bathroom? And so I'm going to try and be as open and as honest as what I can be as I'm sharing with you everything that I went through on the Camino. So for the most part, I went to the bathroom at the albergues and at the cafes. Essentially, when you get to a cafe, if you're buying a coffee, if you're buying a drink of any sort, an orange, a banana, anything like that, then you can use the bathroom. And actually, as I got closer to Santiago, there was a lot of the cafes that said you can use this bathroom for 50 cents or for 25 cents or whatever it might be. And so they have facilities completely available for you should you need them. At the same time, there is times where nature calls when there's not a bathroom around. And so there was times where I was peeing on the trail. And I think all pilgrims did that. There was times where a pilgrim would walk around to the corner and I'd be caught with my pants down. And it just is what it is, nature calls, and we as humans, we have to release when we have to release, where we have the ability to release at that point in time. So that's that question out of the way. And another person asked, what did you do to prepare? And it's interesting because I walked 1 million, I've got this number so memorized. I walked 1,249,490 steps from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to Santiago. And in that time, I didn't have blisters. I didn't have shin splints. I had regular muscles, muscle cramps. And my legs were definitely sore by the end of the day, but I somehow lucked out with not having blisters. And my preparation for this walk was really, I went for a few walks around my city. And did I train on big hills? Well, we've got one hill here that we call Mount Trashmore. And so I would walk to it and climb up it and climb back down. But it's definitely not a mountain like I encountered while I was walking the Camino. And my walks here, my preparation walks, I was walking between 10 and 15 kilometers, where on the Camino, I was walking a lot longer. And I do believe that I didn't get the shin splints and I didn't get the blisters because of a lot of the clearing that I did prior to actually going on the Camino. It wasn't a physical clearing, it was more of a mental and emotional clearing that I was really focused on. And I know from an experience that I had back in 2018, I was in California for a Kyle Cease meditation retreat, and my husband and I had gone over to Warner Brothers Studios to check out the Friends, what do you call it? The Friends set and all of that. And we walked for about 2.5 hours, and I ended up with the most massive blisters on the back of my feet. And when I got home, I had looked up what do blisters mean in one of my spiritual, metaphysical books. And it was all about anger, which was actually something I had accessed that weekend, was a lot of anger. And so the blisters to me, when I was walking this time, they didn't present themselves because I've released a lot of that anger. And I no longer keep my anger pent up inside of me. and I can honestly say because of our experiences with the first Camino, we trained a lot. We were out for walks every weekend doing 17 to 25 kilometers of walking. We were walking with our packs. We had so much planned. And this time going into the Camino, I was really about divine trust. And in my divine trust, I wasn't forcing myself to walk, 25 kilometers at home beforehand. I wasn't booking any albergues ahead of time other than the first 3 days. I really wasn't even going in with a plan to actually make it to Santiago. I just would, when people said, are you walking all the way to Santiago? I'd say that's what the plan is, but we'll see what God has to say. And I can honestly say that was a big fear of mine, was that I'd get back over there again and I'd start walking and something was going to happen that would stop me from reaching Santiago. So I really had to let go of that attachment to the idea of actually reaching it to the end and just taking it one day at a time. That's the other part too, is that I feel like because of the experience that we had last time, because of not being able to really even step onto the path before our son started having the seizures and we made the decision to go home, that it gave me an opportunity this time to walk in complete gratitude. So when my legs were getting sore, I was grateful that I had sore legs because it meant that I was a pilgrim. And when I had a really shitty mattress to sleep on, it wasn't like a defeating kind of experience. It was like, at least I'm still walking. This means I'm a pilgrim. I've got a shitty mattress. There's people that are snoring. I've got sore muscles. I can barely walk at the end of the day. And all of this means I'm a pilgrim. And that to me was such a huge realization as to what I can actually take forward with me now that I'm home, is that when stuff happens, like, if I had an unexpected bill that comes in, or I wake up and I'm feeling sick, or the kids aren't acting how I want the kids to be acting, or whatever it might be, that I'm here experiencing it because I'm alive, that it's because I'm in this human body, it's because I'm having a human experience that I get to experience these things. And excuse me, I even get to cough when I'm trying to speak. And to me, it was such a revelation of how easily we can really focus in on these things that they're a pain. Blisters would be a pain. The muscle cramps, they were a pain, but it meant that I was doing what I wanted to do. And so being a human, there's things that are uncomfortable. There's things that we don't want to do. There's things that we don't like, but it still means we're alive. And that in itself to me is like such a gift, to remember what this miracle is, that we are alive, that we get to be here. We get to experience this humanness and just be alive. So that's one of my insights. And then the other question kind of related to that as well was, how much weight did you lose? And I lost 17 pounds according to the scale. And it's been kind of fluctuating over this past week. Some days I'm up, some days I'm down. And I was really thinking I had lost 20 pounds when I was walking. I was like, you watch the inches coming off and the clothes are getting looser and whatnot. And I felt so light. And the number on the scale, yeah, it's cool that I lost 17 pounds. But more so to me, there was a lot of really big, heavy emotions that I'd been carrying and hadn't even realized I had been carrying. And I lost those along the way. One of the big ones was actually the disconnection from my body, and I'm going to say the intolerance that I had for my body, for the way my body looked. And that goes back to like when I was 12, 13 years old and dealing with a changing body, being in a woman's body that's constantly shifting as you have children, as you age, as you go through puberty, it's constantly shifting. And I was at battle for many, many years with my body, and walking as much as what I walked, and climbing mountains and overcoming these kind of challenging days of, I don't know if I can walk up this mountain, or I don't know if I can take another step, or I don't know if I can, really truly do this. And my body carried me through. And it had nothing to do with the way my body looked. It had nothing to do with how much weight my body was carrying. It had to do with the fact that my body was strong and my body was capable of actually going through these challenges. And again, coming back to the muscle cramps and the sore feet and everything, it was showing me that my body was capable. And so to be able to reconnect with that part that had nothing to do with the way my body looked, had nothing to do with the way my body was shaped, it was like this pure embodied love that I had for my body. And even now when I've come home, I'm continuing to work out, not walking as much as what I was walking by any means. But we have like a little gym that's kind of set up here. And so I've been working out with that and just really stepping into the strength that my body holds, and not to shift the way that it looks, not to tell it, it has to look this way before I can love it or anything. Because I feel like right now, I truly love my body. I can truly stand there and look in the mirror and go, wow, look at what you're capable of. And that to me was so healing and so empowering, to be able to see my body as something beyond what it looks like or how much weight it's carrying, or whether it's thin enough or fat enough or whatever. That stuff doesn't really matter. Our bodies are this miraculous machine, and I got to see it operate in some really, really big ways and embody the parts of myself that had really disconnected from the body a long time ago, just because there was too much pain that was happening in my life at that time. So that was a really, really awesome realization, embodiment that I experienced. Another question was, were you ever scared? Yes. There was one night that I can't even remember the name of the book. I do have my journal here, so I can try and find stuff, and because I don't want to tell you guys any wrong information. It was before that. All right. So there was one day that I walked from Terra de la Vega to the Singing Nuns. And some of you who are on my personal page, you may remember me talking about this day. So on that particular morning, I had woken up and I was feeling really angry. I was very rageful. And the entire time that I was walking, I was really connecting in with ancestral rage and past life rage and this life rage, all to do with the feminine, and all to do with the mistreatment of women, of myself, of my sisters, of my friends, of my mothers, my grandmothers. It was like it all came to the surface. And I walked with that rage for 34 kilometers. It was a really, really long walk. And I had the inspiration to try and get to the Singing Nuns. And the Singing Nuns in Carry On are like this big, don't miss it kind of event. Apparently it's the most amazing thing, whatever. And I got to the village and I saw the nuns monastery and I signed into the albergue there. I got my room. I asked, when are the Singing Nuns? And the man told me the nuns will be there at 7:15, the church 100 meters away. And so I was like, perfect, whatever. Calmed myself down a little bit, relaxed a bit after the walk, went to the monastery and sat there with not the singing nuns, I sat with the silent nuns. And it was me and 6 other nuns, so 7 of us in total, in this church. And at times they would do like a chant, like one would stand up and they would speak something in Spanish, and then the other ones would sit down, or then they would stand up and then they would speak the same thing in Spanish, and then they'd sit down and it would kind of like repeat and whatnot. And I have no idea what was being said, but the energy was amazing. And I feel like God was actually saying to me that day, you need to be silent because your mind has been going all day. And right now you just need to be silent. So I didn't end up seeing the Singing Nuns, even though I had walked the 34 kilometers to see them. So when I was done with the silent nuns, then I walked into the village to try and find something to eat. And there was 2 pilgrims, 2 men, who were like 65 plus, and they started screaming at each other in another language. And I didn't know what they were saying, but then they started taking their walking sticks and they started fighting with each other, and then they dropped their walking sticks and started punching at each other. And I was terrified. I don't like violence. I don't like fighting. And to be in a completely new place that already, like, my day's just been kind of a crazy day. It absolutely kind of triggered the fear inside of me. And I ran ahead and was like kind of stepped in with a couple. There was a man and a woman that were walking, and I started walking with them, and I explained to them, I don't want to be close to those men right now because I don't know what's going to happen. And then realized they didn't speak English, and I didn't have a translator on me at the time to be able to translate to them. So they kind of looked at me weird, and I just kind of walked with them for a few minutes. And then I was away from those men. Then I tried to get supper, couldn't get supper. The restaurant was too busy. It was like a 45-minute wait. And then I said, whatever, I'm just going to go to the convenience store. And I got myself some basically crap for supper. I got an orange, a Coca-Cola, a Kit Kat bar, and some Coca-Cola gummy bears, and then went back to my monastery. And when I got to the monastery, I could not get my room keys to work because Spanish locks are different than our own locks here. And so I was voice messaging my husband going like, I can't even get into this monastery. I can't access this. So like my fear was all coming up because nothing was going the way I wanted it to. And I think it's because I was in such a state when I woke up. I was in this really, really big energy, and I was letting it take over and not actually remembering the truth of who I am or the truth of my experience or anything like that. I was letting this anger take over. The anger, of course, it brings up the fears, and it was such a mess of a day, like really such a mess of a day. But it showed me so much how easily, when I allow myself to connect in with, emotions that are not necessarily real. So my rage that day was based on all these experiences that have happened in the past. They're not even happening now, but I'm pissed about them. It's not real. The past doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean? It's there as part of what my experience has been to bring me here, but none of those experiences were happening, and I was still letting my rage kind of lead the way. And so I feel like everything had to kind of shift that day for me to get back to the truth of what is actually real here. You know, and in my case, I'm showing up to the singing nuns, or thinking that it's the singing nuns, and it turns out that it's the silent nuns that I'm actually sitting there with. And I sat there for an hour waiting for them to sing, not even really cluing in, because they were doing this kind of chanting thing. And I did hear the next day that the singing nuns were amazing, just as I expected them to be. Yes, Kane, I am live right now. So the other question is, did you ever want to give up, and what stopped that? And yes, before I actually even left to do the Camino, I was ready to just call it quits on the entire trip. Fear was coming up for me big time. Going on a trip by myself was terrifying to me. I was afraid that I was going to die and leave my family without me. I was afraid my family was going to die and I would come home to nobody. I was in absolute terror. I also realized or recognized that it was my ego that was trying to stop me, because that's what the ego does, right? Is it goes, oh, you've got this really cool heart calling that you want to do. I'm going to try and put the brakes on this. And so that was one thing that, like, before I even started, I wanted to give up. And then about, I'm going to say 8 or 9 days into the journey, I had climbed up lots of mountains by this point in time. I had climbed down lots of mountains, had more climbing to do. And I woke up one morning after sleeping at a municipal albergue that I absolutely hated. It was a really dingy albergue, and there was a lot of flies and just a lot of noise. And I woke up, I had my period. My body was sore and achy, and I didn't want to walk, and I had to walk. So I started walking, and it was rainy, and it was foggy, and it was cold, and I didn't want to do it anymore. I was like, what is the point of this? Like, I'm not going to make it. Like, if every day is this hard, there's no way I'm going to make it. And I stopped for a coffee at one of the first albergues, or one of the first cafes in the next town. And I was sitting there talking to a woman from Australia, and she had asked me, are you going to Santiago? And I said, that's the plan, but God, these days are hard. And there was a woman across from me in the cafe, and she said, you're going to Santiago? And I was like, it's the plan. And she's like, don't worry, you're going to make it. And then she came over and she introduced herself, and she's a woman from Manitoba. And her husband walked the Camino last year, and they're walking it again this year. And she told me that back when she and her husband first started walking the Camino last year, how much she just wanted to give up at the stage that I was at that moment. And she said, but we made it to Santiago, and you're going to make it to Santiago too. And that in itself saved me in that moment from giving up, and reminding me that there was a bigger reason that I was doing this than the physical aches and pains that I was dealing with, or the lack of belief in myself that was coming up for me. Shortly after that, I had messaged my husband prior to, and I was like, this is not a good day, and blah, blah, blah. And as a woman, when you've got your period, it's like everything's just kind of highlighted. You know what I mean? Everything is just like, your emotions are so up there. Everything is just kind of more sensitive, whatever. And so I had messaged him, and I was like, well, this is hard, and I don't know how I can do this, and there's another hill. And I really had a hard time with the hills. And he messaged me back and just gave me so much encouragement that day. And I guess that's what made me not give up, was the encouragement from other people, the encouragement, the belief that other people had in me when I wanted to give up on myself, and they weren't giving up on me. They were reminding me like, hey, this is the destination that you're going to. And it wasn't that they were bypassing the fact that this was hard. They recognized that this was hard, but they also recognized the strength inside me that I couldn't remember for myself in that moment. And I feel like that's true for all of us as we go through life, is that sometimes we have to be witnessed by another person. We have to have them witness our strength when we can't remember it ourselves. We have to have them witness our love or our conviction or whatever it might be when we can't remember it ourselves. And to trust that when they're pointing it out, they're pointing it out for a reason. So yeah, that was the biggest time that I wanted to give up. It was shortly after that I actually started to feel better in my body, more grounded in my body, more confident in everything that I was doing, and that I was actually going to make it to Santiago whenever I was able to make it to Santiago. So yeah, very grateful for the people that I met along the way, because they just change everything for everybody. And then someone asked, what was it like adjusting to a new bed or new people each night? And honestly, for the first few nights, I was so exhausted from jet lag and from the walking, I just kind of passed out. And another thing that kind of helped me prepare for the Camino that I never realized. So my husband is a snorer, and about, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago, we found a deep sleep meditation that essentially trains your brain to hear snoring as a steamboat coming in on the ocean. And it's a very relaxing meditation, and it's helped me to learn how to deal with his snoring without having to go up to the couch to sleep, or having to like nudge him or punch him or push him over or whatever. And so while I was in the albergues, and you've got all these different kind of snoring sound effects that are happening in the background, background, my brain was just imagining again these steamboats coming in off the ocean. And to me, it was always exciting to meet new people each night, to learn their stories, to hear of why they're walking the Camino. And some people you just really connect with, and some people you don't necessarily connect with, but they become a familiar person or a familiar face as you're walking, because you're all walking in the same direction, and you might be going at different paces, you might be going at different speeds or whatnot, but you all start to kind of see each other along the way. And the more you see each other, the more it's like, oh, I know you. And then you might start up a conversation. The conversation might just happen like that. But essentially, yes, you're meeting new people constantly, and you're sleeping in albergues with new people constantly, but these people do start to become familiar to you for the most part. So yeah. Someone asked, what would I do differently? I thought that was a great question. And there's kind of like two parts to this. So, because I've got like the two Camino experiences, the one that didn't happen and the one that I just completed, in between that space, what I would have done differently, was let go of what my plan was a lot earlier and allowed God's plan to come through. I really struggled with that after the last time, and I can see now the divinity that was actually happening the entire time, but I was so held on to, so attached to what I thought the experience should be. And so this time, as I stepped into the Camino, I carried that wisdom with me and really allowed myself to continuously say, I'm just trusting God's plan. I'm just trusting God's plan. And the day of the singing nuns, when nothing worked out, I had a plan in my head. And it was like a realization for me as well that, like, hey, when you've got a plan, when you're so held to what is going to happen, i.e. the singing nuns, there's sometimes a bigger plan at play that you just need to surrender to. Thankfully, I gave myself permission to actually surrender to that this time, instead of really fighting, everything that was kind of coming up. I wasn't fighting it. I was just going, okay, well, I guess this is the way it is. The other aspect, something that I would change, is I would get people's information sooner on in the journey. And I say that because at the beginning of the journey, I kind of had this expectation that I was going to be walking with the same people every single day, seeing them every night at the same albergues or in the same villages or whatever. And there was people that I connected with at the beginning of my journey that I kept hoping to see again by the end of my journey. And I never seen them again. And I don't know how to contact them. I don't know how to connect with them. But my heart keeps thinking about them and how was their journey and how did things turn out. And because there are some people's stories that I heard that were so vulnerable, that they shared some of their deepest, darkest reasons for walking the Camino, my heart really just wants to know that their heart's doing okay now. And so I wish I would have gotten their information, and I would encourage, if anybody's doing a Camino, if anybody's inspired to do a Camino, to collect information. Anybody that you're just like, yeah, they're a cool person, take their information, see if you can find a way to connect with them down the road. Was there ever problems with communicating? And I'm just getting through all these questions, and then I'm going to share what I actually want to share. So was there ever problems with communicating with people because of the language barrier? I thought this was a great question, and I'm going to say yes and no. There was absolutely one time where it was actually like my third last day of being in Spain, and I was at this albergue and sitting out front enjoying the sun, writing in my journal, and a local came up to me and started speaking to me in Spanish. And I essentially said to him, I'm sorry, I don't really understand what you're saying. I only speak a little bit of Spanish. And I believe what he said back to me is, how can you say that? You're walking the Camino. You must be able to speak Spanish. But I don't really know if that's what he was saying. And he went on at me for about 10 minutes speaking in Spanish, and I didn't understand a word he was saying, and tried to explain that to him, but he just really wasn't having any of it. So that was one time where language was definitely a barrier. The other aspect of it is, there's many people that I met along the way that we didn't speak the same language, that they could perhaps speak broken English, and we could gesture at each other. We could make faces at each other. We could speak to each other in our own languages and understand that the other person's really not understanding us, but we somehow communicated with each other. And so I was able to share food with people who couldn't speak my language. I received food from people who couldn't speak my language. I had people help me with ponchos that couldn't speak my language. We kind of would gesture at our feet and show like the soreness that was happening in our feet, or offer medical supplies, Band-Aids or muscle rub or anything like that. You don't need language for everything. There was a lot of unspoken communication that happened, and it was like we had this common ground. We understood each other. One thing that I found interesting, when I went to the nun monastery at Zebledeka, there was a 97-year-old nun there. She was like the lead sister, I think that's what they're called. Just such an amazing energy about her, such an amazing... She was just absolutely amazing. I loved her. But at that time that I was there, I spoke English. There was a man from Germany, a man from Italy, a man from Denmark, a woman from Denmark, and a couple from Transylvania. And the nuns spoke to each of us in our own languages. She knew how to speak almost every language. And to be able to be witnessed with that was just incredible, because it meant we all could communicate through her. And the man from Denmark actually said to me, and it was such a moment of English privilege, he said, when you know how to speak English, you don't have to learn any other language. But if you speak Danish, you have to learn English. If you speak German, you have to learn English. And I never thought of that before. And I haven't really taken a lot of time to learn different languages. I did spend some time trying to learn Spanish, and I can speak it and I can kind of understand it, but can't always find the words to respond to what I'm hearing. But I didn't realize before what a privilege just speaking English is, because the majority of the world speaks it, that or Spanish. So that was a big aha for me when it came to communication. And then, someone had asked, what habits have I brought home with me, and how am I adjusting at home to having those habits? Am I able to keep up those habits? So I would say the habit of walking, I have not kept up the 24 to 30 kilometers a day. I've not kept that up. I have been out for walks, but definitely nothing within that kind of realm. Excuse me. One thing I found interesting was when I drank a lot of coffee while I was gone. But it was either a cafe con leche, which is like this much coffee with like foamy, steamy cream on top. Or I'd have a cafe Americano, which is just like black coffee with some sugar. And I typically drink like a cafe mocha, so I add hot chocolate into my coffee, and I just absolutely love it. But I haven't been able to drink one since I got home. I tried one when I got home last Saturday night, and I was like, this tastes disgusting. It's not what I want. I just want a black coffee. And so I have been able to let go of my addiction to what the coffee was, and drinking a lot less coffee, because I would drink 2 coffees in Spain that were like this big, and then this is like my coffee mug now. It is taking me a really long time. So I've been able to let go of a coffee addiction, which was not the plan at all. I would say the mindset stuff that I picked up on while I was in Spain, that continues to carry with me and continues to actually, I'm going to say, be reborn inside of my mind, or it's being embodied more in my body, realizations that continue to come through. It's been absolutely profound. And So I would say that habit of the gratitude of it, the deeper way of looking at things, that I was able to gain access to while I was walking the Camino, is definitely a habit that has stuck around. I mean, I've only been back for 9 days now, so we'll see. They say it takes 21 days to develop a habit, so we'll see kind of what that looks like in 11 days from now. And I would say the level of connection between my husband and I, and what our experiences were in that separation between us, and what we've been able to continue to carry on at home. That's another habit that has been formed, but again, it wasn't something I was looking for. It's just what naturally ended up occurring. So those are the answers to your guys' questions. And I guess now I'd like to share a little bit of more of what I learned, more of what I wrote, some of my journal entries. I was reading through them last night, and it's always interesting when you read your own journal entries and it's like they're hitting you for the very first time. Because that to me actually represents the true Camino experience. As much as it was about walking, as much as it is about getting over mountains and climbing these peaks and valleys and meeting new people and everything, it really is about the inner pilgrimage that you go on and the realizations that end up happening, because you've made this commitment to yourself. So I'm going to get started with that. But if you guys have any questions, you go right ahead and ask those questions. I don't know how many of these I'm going to read. I've kind of got the ones highlighted, but there's quite a few. So the night that I stayed at the albergue that I didn't like, I'd been basically writing, and so I decided to stay at the municipal albergue here, but I don't like it. There are so many flies. I am with so many I have yet to see on my journey, and no one is overly friendly. I thought there was a pilgrim's menu, which is like a pilgrim's dinner, but there's only a kitchen that has no utensils in it. So I went into the square and got fettuccine Alfredo and ate alone. I could feel a lot of grief coming up inside of me as I ate alone, missing John and the kids, missing my dad, missing my family and my friends. It is easy to fall into the hole of grief, harder to climb out of it. I did do a tour of the church here, a massive structure dedicated to Mother Mary. The Black Madonna is also featured here, as well as dedications to Isis. Lots of divine feminine energy. Now I'm laying in the albergue, waiting for bedtime to come. The lights are still on, and there's many still shuffling around. And I have... Oh, and even more out somewhere, although I have no idea where they might be. There's nothing to do here. I did get my period this morning as well, which may be playing a part in my tiredness and my emotions. It is hard to think that there would be more grief inside of me after all that I have cleared, but it is the only true emotion I seem to be feeling tonight. I think the hardest part of living, this is the part that I was like, whew, I think the hardest part of living is when you only have yourself to be with. Relationships make each day more bearable and interesting. I'm in my own head right now, and it's quite barren and depressing. So it was a hard day for me that day. Absolutely a hard day for me that day. And then it was 2 days later, as I was walking from Vienna to Navarrete. The journal entry says, as I was walking, it came to me that the only reason I am a wife is because John witnesses that about me. And the only reason I am a mom is because the kids witness that in me. We only exist when another is willing to witness in us the current role we are in. Without a witness, is there any point to living at all? Without a witness, can we ever be truly whole? We need others to validate our existence. Otherwise, we are all just trees falling over in the forest without sound. So I was definitely going through a lot of, I'm going to call it separation anxiety while I was gone, trying to understand myself without relationships around me, feeling my way through a lot of grief without the people around me that I typically would lean on, the people that I would typically have there for support. And I didn't have anyone at that point in time in my journey to be able to go, hey, I need someone to lean on right now. And there's been a lot that's been coming up for me about what we witness in another person. And sometimes, or I question now if what we witness in another person is actually gives that part of them more permission to actually be alive. So if I witness in someone, they're just love, you know, that part of them that is love has now permission to come out because I'm willing to witness it. If there's someone that I'm like, they're an asshole, then that's all I'm ever going to see about them is that they're an asshole. It's all I'm willing to witness. And how much of my own blindness to the witnessing of others has limited them. And if I can move past my own blindness and just witness them as the true essence of love that they are, because that's essentially all we all are, you know, how much more magical can the world be if we can see people in that sense, if we can allow ourselves to witness them in their greatest capacity. Like, what does that actually look like? I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for it. Yes, and you're right, Kathy. What we witness in others also validates what we might not see in ourselves. You're absolutely right. And sometimes what others witness in us is parts of ourselves that we haven't been able to witness yet. And so it's all like, it's also interconnected, and I just love it. Like, I'm so here for it. Sarah, if you want to ask your question, you go right ahead, my dear. And I'll either answer it right now or I'll answer it when I come to it, because I don't know how long it's going to take you to type that up. Okay. And then day 14, I was walking from Belorado to San Juan de Ortega. So today I challenged myself to walk further than a small village, 11 kilometers, to another small village, which was 23 kilometers away. In between the two villages, it was a steep climb and no services for 12 kilometers. It was windy and rainy and not ideal in any way. When I first started out, it was very dark and it was around 7 a.m. and I could barely see any signs for pointing the way. I guess that's how it is in life too. When life around us is dark, it's easy to believe that the signs just don't exist. Eventually the sun came up. It was so cloudy, but I got to see rainbows, which I took as a good sign to just keep walking. As I walked, I thought of my conversation with Nikolai, which was a man I had met the night before. He had been saying that he had spent so long looking for what wasn't there that he couldn't see what was. I too did this when I was caught in the depths of my grief. It was easy for me to see all that weren't there rather than looking at all that were, who didn't have to show up, who opened their home or their heart to me, who still did anyways. It was never from a lack of existence of love, but rather my inability to see it as love, as it wasn't coming from the source that I wanted it to come from. I guess that's true of all things: love, abundance, creativity, hope, trust, acceptance. If we get too caught up on where it should be coming from, we will miss where it actually is available to us. So that was another kind of profound insight for me. Okay, so Sarah, I see your question here. What was it like for you to witness the rage embodied in those men? Well, this is the fantastic thing about this whole experience is the duality between men and women, and the divine feminine, the divine masculine, the masculine presenting itself, the feminine presenting itself. And when I witnessed the rage embodied in those men, I was terrified. And yet I walked with my own rage that entire day and was not terrified. And so I see this often in my relationships. If I witness the rage of another, I'm always scared. And if I have my own rage, I'm not scared. But of course, because rage is such a powerful feeling, it makes you feel empowered. It makes you feel righteous. It makes you feel like, you know, you can walk for 34 kilometers. But to witness it in another, to me, often has been terrifying, especially when it's coming from a man. And one thing my husband and I have been discussing is, for myself, it's very easy for me to express through tears, through sadness, through grief. Like that's kind of what I do. Where for him, it's always been more easy for him to access the levels of anger, whether that be violence or like getting loud, punching things, not people, well, maybe when he was younger. But like we've got a punching bag here that he can go and take some aggression out on and stuff. And a lot of men tend to be terrified of a woman's tears, and a lot of women tend to be terrified of men's anger. And so it's like neither one of us can really hold space for what that looks like in another. And yet it's all very much that same emotion. They say that anger is kind of the protector for grief, which means that when we've got that anger coming up, we're really just essentially covering ourselves up from the grief that's wanting to be expressed, but feeling more powerful about it. So yeah, I think for many of us to witness any rage in anybody is a terrifying experience. And here's the thing is the rage isn't bad, you know, and that's something that I am learning on my own experience now, is that it's all okay. That even the rage, them fighting, it's okay. That was a part of my experience. And actually it's in this moment now that you asked this question that I'm like, it was literally rage, like showing up in my field. I was focused more on the fact that I was terrified by it. And after I'd walked with rage all day, you'd think I'd be kind of used to it, but I was totally in a state of still judging it and feeling terrified by it. So, see, this is what's divine about the universe. It's like they show us all of these different ways that, it's like what you're feeling internally, it shows up externally. And yeah, I love that. Thank you for pointing that out for me. Because I can definitely see that I had to witness that rage and see just how terrifying it is. And then I also wonder, because we all have like these wounded parts, right? And so the part of me that's terrified by that rage, there's a good chance that it actually needed me to witness the rage in those men to actually allow itself to feel terrified, because I was so busy walking with the rage that day. So it actually gave an opportunity for that wounded part of me, for that experience of me to actually express itself and to try and find some of the protection that it was looking for as I walked with the rage that day. So that's another kind of cool insight as well. So thank you for that. Alrighty. If anybody else has any more questions, by all means, ask these questions away. Okay, I think I'm going to bypass that one just because I posted it on my personal page. All right. I'm just looking to see if there's more comments here. Okay. Alrighty. So, there is one day I was walking from Sahagún to El Burgo del Renero. And at this point, the Camino is essentially broken up into 3 stages. They say the first, if we break it into 6 weeks, the first 2 weeks, when you're walking from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to about Burgos, you're in like the physical challenge. So you're building the physical strength. You're doing all the physical kind of growth, strength building, resistance building, that sort of thing. And once you hit Burgos, you move into the mind stuff. So you're focusing on building the strength of your mind. You're focusing on building that mind resiliency and that sort of thing. And then once you get to Astorga, which is about 2 weeks later, then you're stepping into the spiritual growth, the spiritual strength building and whatnot. So this was, yeah. So I was in Sahagún, and Sahagún is kind of like the middle point of the Camino. And when you're there, you get like a halfway Compostela because you've walked halfway and whatnot. So I'm not in the spiritual aspect of things yet. However, the conversations that you start to have with people at the very beginning is very much about the physical challenge and how far are you walking? How far are you walking today? La da 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 da. As we started to move into the mind stuff, the conversations also started to shift into more mind stuff. And then we get to the spiritual aspect. It's almost like the conversations start to shift into more spiritual, deeper conversations. But on this particular day, I was walking with a woman, and she had wanted to talk to me about energy healings and spirituality, etc. We were talking about the divine feminine. We were talking about the Virgin Mary. We were talking about just all kinds of things. And then she said to us that she had this kind of game that she liked to ask people these questions. And the questions were, it's actually just one question, but what are your top 3 regrets in life? And then we had to take time to reflect on it and come back to each other and say, what are our top 3 reflections in life? And for myself, my top 3 was 1, turning away from God, rather than surrendering to God's will. I have a tendency, or had a tendency, of when I had an idea of what way I thought life should go, when it didn't go that way, I just would completely collapse and not look at God and go, what can I do to serve you? What do you need from me, or anything like that? It was more like, why are you doing this to me? Why are you abandoning me? Why are you against me? And so I spent way too much of my life, and I say way too much, and I don't mean that as judgment, but I just know I spent more of my life kind of questioning God rather than trusting in that divine plan and trusting that it was all divine working for me. And so that is a regret because it's a lot of wasted time. The second regret was about me turning away from my dad when he was diagnosed with cancer and stepping into anger. And that was something that I have carried with myself since I was 15, because it was within 3 weeks of finding out that he had cancer. I started smoking, lost my virginity, was just angry. I was depressed, stopped going to school. I became the rebellious teenager instead of really trying to connect with my dad at that point. I was really moving away from my dad. And then the third one was listening to others' voices as being more important than my own. But the one that really brought up emotion for me was about my dad. And I'm just going to read the journal part now. So I say the part about my dad got me the most emotional. I remembered again of when he about when he got open and vulnerable about the song Knocking on Heaven's Door, and I couldn't say anything. And essentially what that memory was it was about 3 weeks before my dad died. And I was home from school that day and sitting with him in the living room, and we were watching TV, but the radio was playing on in the background. And the song Knocking on Heaven's Door came on. And he started crying, and he said, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. And I might get emotional now too. And I froze. I did not know what to say to him at that time. And there's been so much of my life since that moment that I've replayed that moment over and over again going, you should have said something. You should have, said something. But I never knew what do you say to someone that's lying on their deathbed, that's fearful of dying. And so I had said nothing, and I carried that with me. I'm going to go back to the journal now. So I go on to say I've carried such guilt about that throughout my life, that I froze, that I didn't help him, that I didn't say anything. I realized then that this too was a reflection of my inability to hold space for John when he was feeling vulnerable. So I messaged him and asked him how he would like me to hold space for him or other men, and what that should even look like. I shared my regrets about my dad and even John's dad, because he's also gotten emotional in front of me and I've never known what to say to him and John, and how I don't know what's appropriate when it comes to holding space for men. This led to a profound discussion on becoming the witness to another's pain, as it's being the witness that allows everything to unravel. And that day as I'd been walking, the song Amazing Grace just kept playing in my head over and over and over again. And the part that really stuck out to me was the lyric that says, "We've no less days to win God's grace than when we first began." And the moment, to me, the moment that we have the realizations, all moments are healed within our experience. And so me realizing at that point in time that I got to witness my dad's pain and his fear and his vulnerability. And that was all I needed to do. I didn't need to fix it. I didn't need to heal it. I didn't need to change it. I didn't need to save him. I didn't need to stop heaven from calling him. I didn't need to do any of that. I just needed to be there as a witness, and I was doing that. And when I had that realization that I just needed to witness what his experience was in that point in time, that he didn't need me to save him from that, that was a huge weight and a lifetime of guilt that I've carried that was just suddenly lifted off of my shoulders. So just reading your comment here, Kathy. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And here's the thing, Kathy, is I realize now I didn't actually need to say anything. I sometimes we don't have to. That part of the witnessing is to just simply witness another's pain, and that we don't need to change it. We don't need to shift it. We don't need to stop them from experiencing it. That would be like trying to stop someone who has to pee. Like, we just need, we just need to pee. And sometimes we just need someone to show us, hey, there's the bathroom there. That's all we need. And so it's, to me, it's really just the gift of allowing ourselves to witness another's pain, that we don't need to fix it. We don't need to change it. We can just witness it. And that in itself is enough, because once it's witnessed, it starts to unravel. And then it's as though it has not, ever really truly existed, because now that pain has been witnessed. I love that question, Deb. So Deb is saying, how has your spiritual journey impacted those closest to you? For me, following your journey through your Facebook posts provided me with my own aha moments. I am so grateful for openness and insights, and how vulnerability opened parts of my heart. Thank you for that, Deb. So yeah, this journey, it was so much more than I expected it to be. When the Camino started calling me way back in 2016, I thought I knew my reasons for walking it. And then when it didn't happen last year, I thought my reasons for that had all changed, and I came to a deeper understanding for what my reasons of that were. And then even when I started out on this journey, I was like, this is why I'm doing this. And I was basically like gaslighting myself on how impactful this was going to be. While I would say about 3 weeks into the journey, John, my husband, he went through his own kind of breakdown to breakthrough moment. And essentially when I got home from the Camino, he said to me, it was as though you had to walk this Camino so that I could find myself. And the result that has happened from me walking and him healing at the same time that I'm walking has been absolutely mind-blowing. I really don't even have words for that right now. But we did like a journal, because we both have our journals from when I was gone. And last night we sat down and we compared our journals day for day for day for day. And there was times that I was writing things in my journal that it was almost like it became a wish out in the universe that was then manifested through John and his experience. And we might just release a book called The Camino Diaries. And it's just the most profound thing as we were reading through it last night. And I mean, there was times that we were both being triggered. There was times that we both have abandonment issues. And there was times that those abandonment issues were really coming up to the forefront, and we're doing this communication across like 6,000 kilometers, trying to understand where the other person's at, trying to fulfill what our kind of journey is at that point in time, and trying to navigate all of that. And it was bringing up the most profound insights and revelations and insights and awarenesses and all of this. So that would, I would say, would be like the hugest impact that happened. Now, with my kids, there was just major growth with all of them. So there was things that they were struggling with prior to me going that they're now confident with. There's aspects of themselves, things that they've been, I'm going to say, wanting to do, wanting to pursue, that sort of thing that they're now confidently moving forward towards. And there's been shifts in other relationships that I have as well. I don't want to go into specifics because I don't have permission from anyone to say their name or anything like that. But in my circle of people, the conversations have gotten deeper. People that I didn't think were, it sounds awful, that I didn't think were capable of actually opening their heart to me. I've had some really impactful conversations with them since I started the journey and since I've gotten home, which has been such a gift in itself. And John said to me, I want to say Saturday night, that essentially me walking this Camino was like a way for me to give back to all of these people in my circle, and whether it's people who are reading stuff online or whether it was in our immediate family or for our ancestors. There was a lot of ancestral work that I felt like I was doing while I was walking the Camino. And so I feel like it's almost had like this ripple effect that I didn't even realize it was going to have. And your example of following my journey and just getting that inspiration from the Facebook posts and stuff, I've heard that from so many people. And that was one aspect that I realized, I guess, when I got to Astorga, when I got to the spiritual aspect of the Camino, was that my gift to humanity, my gift to myself, to my family, to my friends, to everybody is, and I think this is not just my gift, I think it's everybody's gift, is to simply follow the callings of my heart. Because when I follow the callings of my heart, it's like it opens the door for everybody else to be able to start following the callings of their heart as well. And it just, in so many ways, it feels like, because I gave myself permission to do this, because I took the courage to actually follow through with this, and however you want to lay it, it opened it for other people to be able to start to do the same, to help them get back into their heart. And I think that's the big thing when we call it a heart calling. Yes, it's impactful on me, and I feel like there's a ripple effect that's going to continue for myself from this point forward. But even more so when I follow those heart callings, then it starts to transcend through other people. It's like turning on a flashlight, and it's like it's illuminating all of that darkness. So that was a very kind of, I'm going to say, another permission slip to myself when I realized, when I do this, then, you know, it helps everybody else at the same time. So that's how I would say this impacted those that are closest to me. John and I are actually going to be going live on Sunday night. We're going to be talking about conscious communication and starting a series on creating conscious relationships. And this is something that we've kind of hinted around, I'm going to say, for the past 4 years, maybe longer than that. But we've never actually given ourselves permission to do it. I've always been a bit resistant to it. He's had some resistances to it. Like, we both have these different things of fear that have come up. But with what this journey has been, it's almost like it was the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, saying to us, like, it is go time. Like, stop fucking around and just go with this. So yeah, I feel like, I don't know, things are still shifting. And the impact is still, there's the ripple effects that are happening now. So just allowing myself to trust in those ripple effects now as well. If anybody has any other questions, by all means, answer them. I realize I've been talking for an hour now. I do have more I want to share, but I'm actually kind of thinking some of this stuff might have to just wait to be shared later, and that's okay too. Yeah, I'm just going to wait and see if there's any more comments coming in. It's so funny doing it on more than one screen and then having to like try and pay attention to everything. Okay, doesn't look like. Alrighty. So it doesn't look like there's any more comments coming in. There is more that I'd like to share, but I also want to respect everybody's time, including my own. So I think what I'll do is actually just start making maybe some more little videos and just sharing some more of these insights and stuff that I've gotten, and even more insights as they start to come up. I guess essentially what I would want to say to each of you is if you have a heart calling, just follow it. I had no idea why I had to walk the Camino 8 years ago. And even though I had ideas as to why I had to walk it, as I started walking it, God had a much bigger plan in place for me to experience, for me to embody, for me to embrace, for me to share. And my mind couldn't even come up with what this divine plan has been or how orchestrated everything has been. And the heart callings don't always make sense, and the heart callings sometimes go against everything. To me, it felt like for me to follow my heart, it means I'm going against everything. Like, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I've got this business, like I've already gone once, I don't need to go again, da 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 da. But you got to just keep going with it and go with it and follow it. And when you follow it, magic will happen. And I know there's fear that comes up that makes us go, I can't. And I know maybe the past is hindering or the fears of the future are hindering or whatever, but trust that you can absolutely do it, that whatever your heart calling is, you can do it, and take it one mountain step at a time. Actually, that's the last thing I'm going to share, because here's the thing, I keep talking. The mountains. Ontario hills are nothing like Spanish mountains, and there's absolutely no way I think I could actually prepare to walk mountains unless I was to fly over to Spain and practice walking on the mountains. And the first 3 days, I think every time I seen another ascent happening, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Because I kept thinking, like, I've got to be close to the top now. I've got to be close to the top now. Although I was more like, I've got to be close to the top now. I was like exhausted, out of breath. My muscles were aching. My legs were sore. My shoulders were sore, like whatever. And it was about, by the time I got to the 4th or 5th day, I realized that I was taking every single mountain as being like personally put there by God for me to walk up, because I don't like going up the mountains. And it was like, okay, Catherine, get over yourself. These mountains have been here for millions of years, and it's nothing personal. So you have a problem with mountains. It's not like the mountains are there to piss you off. Which is the same with life's challenges. They're not there to piss us off. They're not personal. They're there to help us climb them. We can strengthen ourselves. We can build our muscles. We can get stronger as we climb them, but they're not personal. And the moment I let go of this kind of personal aspect of the mountains and went, okay, so they're just mountains and I'm just going to have to climb it, and then I'm going to go down and I'm going to climb more and I'm going to go down and whatnot, the easier it became to actually climb mountains. So don't take things personally, because they're not. And that's a lesson for me, is to just not take it personally, to trust that it's there, yes, and I can get stronger by walking over it, or I can stay at the bottom of it and not get stronger at all and just keep bitching that there's a mountain there. But we get a choice, and I know. And I chose to walk the Camino. I know. It's hilarious, right, Sarah? I chose to walk the Camino, and I don't like climbing mountains. But I love the descent. I love being at the top, and I love the descent. I just didn't like climbing. And it was because I felt so weak and my legs hurt, and, the backs of your legs hurt because you're like climbing. And I'd get out of breath, and I felt like I was too slow. And I just had a lot of judgment going on myself. And there was actually a man that I met. It was when I was walking across the Meseta, and there's a really big mountain in the middle of the Meseta. And the Meseta is kind of like flatland with a really big mountain. And I'd never met him before, but walked up this mountain and whatnot, got at the top, and I was taking my drink and taking some pictures and having a rest. And this man walks up, and he's like, "Oh man, feel that blood pumping through the body. Wow, what a great climb. Wow, that was amazing. Oh, I feel so alive right now." And he was just really like loving the way his body was feeling in that moment, where I was feeling the opposite, going, "Oh my God, what a climb. Oh, I'm so exhausted. Oh, my heart's beating so fast." And when I heard him, it was like, wow, that is the kind of attitude I want to have. And so as I continued to walk, and there's of course more mountains and hills and stuff to climb, I started like channeling this man through me and going like, when you feel your heart starting to beat really hard in your chest, it's like, wow, feel that blood pumping through my heart. Wow, feel how achy my muscles are getting. Like I'm getting so strong. And I really started to embody that kind of personality, and it helped. It helped so much. And so, yeah, I call that channeling my inner Bill, because he was just so enthusiastic about how his body was reacting to all of this. And I needed that kind of perspective shift. So, yeah, and I feel like carrying that towards any challenges that life can bring as well, to be like, wow, look at this challenge. Look at how much I'm learning right now. Look at how much I'm doing right now. Look at all these old limiting beliefs that I'm letting go of right now. Yeah, it can suck. There can be these things that are being triggered, but wow, this is beautiful. So yeah, there's so much more magic that I want to share, but I am going to cut myself off. So thank you everybody for joining me here tonight. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for joining in on the conversation. I am so excited because I get to go live again. October 29th was the day that Facebook took any restrictions off of this new account. And I walked into Santiago on October 30th. So it just felt like this double kind of boom, boom, and I get to be live again. So we made it through that challenging part, and I'm very excited to bring to you guys more live videos, more conversations, more healing insights. Looking forward to sharing mine and John's experiences and the knowledge that we've got coming through right now with you guys. So I hope you join us on Sunday night, and hopefully Zoom will work better, because I don't know that we'll both fit in on the cell phone, but we'll see. Anyways, have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me, and sending you all so much love, and we'll chat with you soon. Have a good night.